Hi, my name is Gabe Weaver. I'm a senior product manager in the plan stage at GitLab. Today, I'm going to talk through how to facilitate multi-team planning in GitLab with the ultimate level functionality. Here's a scenario we're going to talk through today. We have an awesome company. This company has three value streams, let's say consumer products, services, and logistics. Each value stream has the cross-functional squads that has all the stable counterparts necessary to deliver working software, customer value, and business outcomes. So this is the topology of the organization and the teams. Awesome company breaks down their work this way, where they have a highest level epic, which they sort of run usually, the 6 month period, and they plan at the portfolio level. Those get decomposed into capabilities. Capabilities are decomposed into features, and features are decomposed in this lowest level thing called tasks, stories, bugs, and maintenance. They plan biannually at the portfolio level, and that's where they kind of decide what epics they're going to work on. They plan their capabilities and features for releases on an 8-week schedule, and the actual squads are autonomous and can pick if they want to do iteration-based or time box-based planning, or if they want to use a pull system like Kanban. Typically, the teams that are using iterations do it on a 1 to 3 week rolling cadence. AwesomeCo has also sort of created this dual track workflow for work items. One is the refinement track, where you triage incoming issues or work items, you do the necessary design on them, you validate the solutions and the problems, and then you work with your stable counterparts to refine, break down, estimate your work items. After that, it's ready to be scheduled into the actual build track, where they go into the backlog, which is this ready state. Engineers pull them into progress when they're ready to start. And when they're done, they go into a review process, QA, checking stuff out on staging. When it has actually been approved and the merge request has been merged, it goes into done, and it's pending deploy into a production environment. Once it gets deployed, the issue or work item gets closed. So this is basically how they want to operate, and we're going to kind of demonstrate how you can do that within GitLab. I've gone ahead and set up a lot of the structures just to save time and watching a bunch of mouse clicks, but within GitLab, we have something called groups. I've created this group for AwesomeCo, which is considered the top level company group. Within that, I've created subgroups for each of their different value streams. So we have logistics that has squads E and F in it. We have consumer products that has squads C and D, but those squads also just work across both of their projects, web app and mobile app. And then we have a services group that is kind of handles the API, the custom portal, and some things like that. I've also created a project within AwesomeCo for ops that has some shared settings. There's also a wiki-only project to track sort of some wiki-related and documentation. The thing to understand about how groups and projects work in GitLab is that the hierarchy sort of defines how information flows up and down the hierarchy. So there's two sort of main objects in GitLab. There's epics, there are issues. Within Ultimate, you can have multi-level epics, which we'll get to in a minute. And then issues are the lowest level kind of work item. Issues live at the project level, epics live at the group level. Issues, if from squads E and F, for example, would flow up and be visible in logistics. They would flow up and then also be visible in AwesomeCo. So AwesomeCo has this sort of ability to look across all of their groups and projects and all of the work items that are there. You also have the ability to create things within AwesomeCo that flow down. So you can create epics in AwesomeCo, which are visible within logistics, so that you can assign sub epics or child epics and issues to those and sort of build this sort of hierarchical work item structure that we talked about before. I've also created within this top level group labels. Labels are a pretty powerful primitive within GitLab that allows you to have a pretty robust taxonomy for your work items. It's helpful for reporting, for managing kind of what type of work item it is, workflows, and all sorts of other things. There are two kinds of labels in GitLab. There are normal labels, which you're probably used to, and scope labels are something that is going to kind of be unique to GitLab. And a scope label acts sort of like a custom field, and that an issue or an epic can only have one label of a given key at a time. So if I have an issue with capability 1 refine, and I try to add this capability 2 review label, it will automatically remove this other first label and apply the second one. You can have as many different keys of scope labels as you want, but only one key on a given issue. So why? This is helpful for doing things like visualizing workflows. If you're familiar with having components of your system that you want to tag issues or epics to, for storing t-shirt sizes, for example, on higher level work items. I've created a set of scope labels for priority, a set of scope labels for different squads that are going to own the different work items. I've also created scope labels to denote that kind of work item hierarchy that we talked about before, where epic is the highest level, then we have a capability, and then we have a feature, and then features get decomposed into bugs, maintenance, tasks, or stories. I also set up scope labels to kind of visualize and manage that workflow that AwesomeCo has. So things go into triage, they can go into design, they can go into validation, refinement, ready. That's the refinement track. And then we get into the build track where we have some workflow labels for that as well. So labels are great because if you create them at a higher level, it's a way to standardize the taxonomy of your work items downstream. So we were at AwesomeCo and I created the labels there. If I were to go down and look at Squad F, for example, and go look at their label list, they're going to have all the same labels that we defined above. Squad F can also create their own labels if they want to break from what is sort of the standards or do things a little bit outside of the lines. But this is a great way to simplify management of your labels across all of your subgroups and projects, and also promotes consistency. In terms of how like planning cadences work in GitLab, we have two kind of constructs. AwesomeCo has their 8-week release cycle, and for that, I've created milestones. So milestones can have time dates, start end dates, or they cannot. You can use them, they're pretty flexible, but in this case, I'm going to use them to manage my releases. So I've created a release for each of the upcoming 8-week cycles. And so we're out 24 weeks at this point. And when you look at a milestone detail view, you have burn down and burn up charts if you have start and end dates. You can filter these charts by issue count. You can filter them by issue weight. You can see a list of all of the issues that are associated with this given milestone or release, and also basic status on them if they've been unstarted, if they're ongoing, or if they've been completed. We also roll other things up like time tracking, reporting, and overall progress completion rates on your milestones. And so that's your kind of 8-week cycle. And then for those teams that are doing the 2-week cycles, we have something called iterations. And so an issue can belong to both a milestone and an iteration at the same time. So this is a feature that is up and coming. It's behind a feature flag, but I'll go ahead and show it off because it'll be live in GitLab.com soon. Well, I mean, it is live. It's just behind a feature flag that's enabled for this group. But it's something called iteration cadences. And what that is like each cadence can be created, and it's just basically a collection of iterations. When you create it, you can add a title. You can denote that you want it to automatically schedule upcoming iterations. You pick the start date of your first iteration, how long in weeks each iteration is supposed to be, if you want to automatically roll issues over or not, how many future iterations you want GitLab to maintain. So if you finish your first iteration, GitLab will automatically create the 5th iteration, right? If you want to always maintain 4 in the future. So this pretty much takes away all of the headache with moving issues from one iteration to the next, creating new iterations, ending iterations. It pretty much makes that painless. The other nice thing about this is if you have lots of teams that are sharing one group, you can have multiple different cadences that all run on their own schedules. So here we can see these 3 squads run every 2 weeks, but Squad D, they want to have 3-week iterations, which is fine. And they're able to do that now. Each of them can assign their own work items to their different iterations and have their own progress reporting, similar to how milestones work. And so this sort of dual time box system allows you to do higher level release planning, as well as allowing teams then to take what has been scheduled for release and break it down in even smaller time boxes, which are iterations in GitLab. So that's how time boxes work. Next, let's start talking about how do we plan scope and how do we actually take that work item hierarchy and represent it in GitLab. For that, we use something called epics, and then we also use issues. So let's say for this upcoming release, AwesomeCo wants to have a 1.0 launch of their flagship products. In order to do that, they have to collaborate and have work delivered from each of the different value streams. For example, I've created this epic here, which is the highest level over here is denoted as an epic. I've created a mobile app interface within the consumer products team, created a web app interface, sub epic, which is a capability within the consumer products group as well. And then we have some infrastructure and some API stuff that the services group needs to deliver. Those can further be decomposed, as we mentioned, down into features. So we need to create the account flow. And within that, we also need to manage some web app user settings. But let's say that we want to decouple web app user settings from create account flow. You can just drag and drop your epics to reparent them right within this view. So it's a great way to kind of move things up and down, to reorganize. You can also drag and drop any of your epics to reorganize them if you want to visualize it differently, or sequence things out in a different way, or change the parenting structure. From when this is in this view, you can also add new issues and you can create new epics as well. So let's say I missed some scope when I need to add something for the logistics group. I can go down here, select the group that I want to create the epic in, and add some reporting for the supply chain and create that epic. So this will go ahead and create this epic within this and nested under this 1.0 launch. I've created it in the logistics group, so it's visible there, but it's also automatically rolled up into this higher level 1.0 launch that we need to do. The interesting thing about epics is there's two different ways that they can manage and be scheduled in terms of their dates. You can set some fixed dates if you want. And this is basically where you're going to manually set the start date, manually set the due date, or epics have something called inherited dates. And the way that works is it looks across all of the issues that are part of this epic, all the way down at the lowest level, kind of determining your tasks, your maintenance items, your bugs, your stories. And it's going to pick the earliest start date based on if that issue has a due date assigned, iteration, or a milestone, and that milestone start date. And then it's going to look at the latest end date it can find across all those different time ranges. And that's how it kind of dynamically keeps us up to date. So in terms of planning breakdown, you start with your scope and you decide what you need to do to call this complete, what you think you need. And then as a team starts to break this down and plan it into releases and into iterations, you can start to see when it's actually going to be completed based on where the team estimates and what they think and where they've scheduled things out. And this is a great way to signal upstream if you need to cut scope, if you need to negotiate trade-offs, depending on if you're on a fixed schedule or on a fixed scope basis. Epics also can be set to be confidential. And if they're confidential, they won't be visible downstream. And you have this very rich kind of audit history for every single change that ever happens to the epic and who changes it and what they do. Epics also have discussions, so you can have threaded discussions directly within the epic, and you can see what has changed within the description as you edit over time. So anytime anything ever changes on this, it's going to show up as a system note within this kind of log down here, which is super helpful. So you may be wondering, once we've defined our business scope, and we know what we need to do for the 1.0 launch, we've sort of created our different epics and our different subgroups and projects. The next thing to do is thinking about how we might want to plan and manage these going on. So there's two different kinds of boards within GitLab. There is an epic board, and you can have as many boards as you want at the group level. So I've created one board to kind of represent showing my different feature level epics broken down by component, which is one of those scope labels we set. You can visualize progress directly here as well. You can kind of see what all scope is going into which parts of your overall system or value stream. I've also created a board that has kind of a light workflow just for capabilities. So as we want to create new capabilities, we want to break them down. You can actually move your epics through their own workflow independent of the issues. And this is a great way for product managers or executives to sort of manage the workflows for their higher level work items. I've also created a board that has lists based on the different types or the different levels of work item. So if I want to quickly visualize it that way, I can do it within this board view. And I've also created a board that has lists for each of the squads. So I can see which squad is working on which feature, and I can also see the completion progress. So this is one view that you can use to slice and dice your epics and kind of visualize them in different ways based on how you set up your label taxonomy. Boards can be filtered within the epic board. You can do it by label or author, and then you can also set a permanent scope if you want. So in this case, I've scoped this board to feature because squads own features in this system. So that's epic boards. And now we can kind of get into issue boards and some of the common things that you're going to do in release and iteration planning. Let's start with the first kind of track that we talked about, and that's the refinement track. I've scoped this board to have no milestones, so it's only going to show me issues that haven't already been scheduled into an upcoming release. This is great for doing things like triaging new issues. If a new issue gets opened, it's going to show up in this triage list based on some of the templates that I set up, which I'll show you in a little bit. And this lets me kind of move things through. If I know it's just a bug and we don't need design, I can actually move this all the way into refinement. And what this does is it's going to be a signal to the engineers that they should probably jump in. And so every week, my engineers, they'll look at our kind of breakdown list or refinement list, and they'll kind of see that as a signal that they need to start estimating and breaking down issues into implementation tasks. Let's say as soon as a bug is ready to go and it gets weighted, we can add a weight directly within the board via the sidebar, and then we can move that issue into ready, which will flow into our release planning board. So here's that bug that we talked about, and we can see that it's ready with the ready label. This one that's still in triage is not ready, so I don't want to schedule that out. But one of the nice things that you can do with this board is you can create lists based on milestones. So you have 4 different kind of basic lists that you can create on boards right now. There's label, assignee, milestone, or iteration. So boards are a lot more than just managing workflows or issues. They're actually very powerful for managing your entire backlog and for doing release and iteration planning. So in this view, what I want to go ahead and do is I want to, let's say, group by epic. Okay. And I see here, let's go ahead and move this back over here. Let's say we want to tackle that one in release 1. And what this lets you sort of do is see all of your issues grouped by the feature that they belong to, so that you can begin to sequence them out into upcoming releases. And so given that I know that this is an 8-week period, I think my team can probably get 50 weight done in that period. There's only 15 issues, so I'm not too worried about that, which is great. So now that we've done this basic gist of doing high-level release planning, you might want to ask, like, how do I actually track the progress of all this stuff at a high level without having to dig into a board view? And this is sort of where our roadmap comes into play. And a roadmap is a high level sort of executive view that will show you all of the upcoming issues and epics that you have scheduled out over the upcoming releases. So once an issue has a time box associated to it, or a milestone or a due date, it gets automatically inferred into this schedule right here. And then you can actually unfurl this, similar to your epic hierarchy and the epic detail view, to track progress reporting. And so as the team works on these different things, these different epics and these different issues and delivers them, it will actually show a burn down progress for each of them in terms of how much weight has been completed out of how much weight is actually assigned to that given epic. And as you can see here, this one for adds some reporting for the supply chain, it has 0 of 0 weight, but that's because it hasn't been scheduled out. It hasn't been broken down. And so this is also a great way from the roadmap view to understand which epics have been refined and which haven't, so that you can jump in and pay special attention to them and move them forward. So this is sort of a great view to get a high level understanding where things are going to go. But what's interesting is if we go back to our board now, where we do our release planning, and let's say that we know something is going to take, it's not going to get done until release 3, for example, right? If we go back to our roadmap, because of that kind of inherited date range, we automatically see that the epic duration has been adjusted to account for where the issues have been scheduled within it. So this is a great way to dynamically manage your roadmap without having to manually set time, start, and end dates based on where the teams on the ground and on the front line are scheduling the issues out. So this is the roadmap view. It's also filterable by labels, by milestones, by epics, and by author as well. So there's a great way that you can slice and dice this if you want to drill down on specific parts of it. Now, when it comes down to team planning, I set up a board that is based on iterations. So it has lists for each iteration. As you can see, these are my upcoming iterations, one's in progress right now. And within this board view, it's also great to filter by epic. And so what's nice about this is issues have something called dependencies. So you can create a blocking or blocked by issue. So if we look at the detail view for this, we can see right now it's linked to another issue that's actually in a different team, and it's blocked by that team completing things. So within the board view, we can kind of see that this implement new settings endpoint is blocked by the post settings issue. The post settings issue is right here. And because of that, I've gone ahead and intentionally sequence out these other issues that are dependent on this one into the follow-on iteration. So that way we don't get bottlenecked and can't basically move an issue forward and have to leave it standing at the end of the iteration. So this is another great view for teams about how they can schedule their issues out into upcoming iterations. I also manage a team board for myself. And what I do is I have a list for each of my team members. And what this lets me do is I can see all of the issues that they're currently working on. And based on your label taxonomy, I can kind of see the status of where they're at. I can see if they're blocked. I can see the weight. And so this gives me a great view. Like if we want to limit the number of issues that any team member has, we can also set work in progress limits on an issue. And let's say that I'm only supposed to be working on 2 at the same time. We can go ahead and do that. And you'll notice that it automatically flags this as red. And so this is a great way to see and manage team member overload. And so if somebody is pulling in too many things, there's no way they're going to be able to work on 4 at a time. So it's a great signal for the team member themselves that they might have too many issues assigned to themselves. The last board that I have at this level is the build track. And this is where this board has been scoped to the current iteration. And what that means is only going to show issues that are in the iteration that's currently active. This is what the team is going to look at most frequently. I, as a product manager, am probably going to look at the iteration planning and the release planning boards and maybe even team boards. But the team, they just want to know what they need to work on next. So this is the board that they can come to. And then we typically pull from the top of the list. And so if this, let's say we want to do the post first, because we know that that's blocking some other issues, an engineer can pick that up, move it in progress. And then as they're working on things, they can kind of move it through the different cycles. You can either update by dragging and dropping, or if I'm on the issue detail view itself and it's ready to move into review, I can add the label from the sidebar and I can put it into review. Then when I go back to my board, I refresh it, you'll see that it's now in the review state. So no matter where you edit the issue, it's going to be reflected on the board itself, because this is sort of just a view, a way to kind of slice and dice your issues. It's super helpful. You can also group by epic within this view. One of the kind of cool things about the way this works is I've created a lot of these things in this top level awesome code. But if you want, let's say, your team to have their own views into only their own things, and I go into this consumer products group, I can also from this view go to view my epics or view my roadmap, and I see just those roadmap items which are within the consumer products group itself. So I don't see the noise of everyone else. I can just see my work. And so this is where it's great for a product owner to be able to view things at this level, maybe a product manager at the higher level, but you have these sort of different ways and different options for how you roll your work up depending on where you create it. At this level, you can also create issue boards just like you did at the higher level group. And so if we want to go ahead and create a, let's say, iteration board, we can do that. We can pick the current iteration that's going on right now, which I think is 7, create that board. And we can see a list of all of the issues within this specific squad that's responsible for delivering these specific issues. It's pretty handy. Now let's dive into the issue detail view a little bit. The issue detail is similar to the epic detail. It just has a little bit more bells and whistles to it because it's where most of the work actually takes place. Within the issue, you can add a time estimate if you want by a quick action. So let's say we think this is going to take more than 40 hours. Let's go ahead and update that. As you'll see, this is updated the estimate to 8 hours. And then as I want to work on this issue, I can go ahead and spend, let's say we want to spend 2 hours. I've just gotten done doing some work and some tasks. You can see the time tracking gets reported there. You also can set labels here. You can set your weight. You can mark the health status. You can make it confidential. The other really nice thing about this is you can link issues, and this is where you can manage your dependencies. We also have something called the design manager, and you can upload designs directly from your desktop. And what this does, it actually creates a version for each design. If it's an image file, and if I upload this another image after I've updated this design, it will actually create a second version of this directly here. We have a Figma plugin, which lets you push directly to issues from within Figma so that designers don't even have to come into GitLab in order to push their designs up to collaborate. And we have the ability within, when we're viewing a design, to drop pins and comments on different things. We could say, hey, Gabe Weaver, do you think this should look the same as the create button? I don't. And what this does is when you mention people in comments, it's going to create a to-do for them. To-dos are a great way to collaborate with team members in GitLab. As you can see, I mentioned myself in this conversation. I can go to my to-do list, and it says right here, this is the comment that was added. I can drop directly from my to-do list back into that design. I can interact with the other individual. In this case, it's myself. And then once we make those changes and the button actually gets resolved in a different design that gets pushed up, I'll be able to see it directly here overlaid with my comments, and I can resolve the comment, and then it's done. We've handled it, it's fixed, and it's ready for implementation. So it's a great way to integrate and collaborate on designs between engineering, product, and UI UX early on in the process before you actually get to implementation. Similar to epics, you have your audit history, which is pretty awesome. And you also have the ability to have threaded conversations just like within epics. You could upvote or downvote or add emoji rewards. And what this lets you do as well is from your list view of issues, you can actually sort your issue list in lots of different ways, but let's say by popularity, which is the up or down votes, right? So now I can see the total count of up or down votes and those issues that are upvoted the most, which is pretty handy. You can also, within the list view, do manual mode, or you can do a milestone due date, or by weight, or you can actually filter by the number of blocking issues. So in this case, I can see right here that this create account form is actually blocking 2 other issues from moving forward. I can kind of look into here. And right now I can see that this is blocked by that add support for post user. So as you can see, there's a really rich way to do dependency management within GitLab issue tracking. One of the other things that I'm going to highlight briefly is requirements management. And for those companies that are a little bit more compliance minded, let's say that you need to have a hard requirement and you need to make sure that it is satisfied. What a lot of organizations do is they'll manually test that. They'll have a test case that is sort of like an issue. They'll mark it as satisfied after somebody goes in and tests that out. But one of the things that we have in GitLab is the ability to automate basically the completion of requirements or marking them as satisfied or failed directly by linking them to unit tests. So if I want to create a new requirement, let's say make the button green, or let's say requirement the button should be green, right? You have the ability to do some rich text editing in here as well for tasks. If you want to kind of add some additional color and context to how the requirement should behave. But as you can see right here, now I have this button should be green and it's not marked as satisfied, which means it hasn't even been started. It's not in the progress. It's not satisfied. It hasn't been worked on at all. So let's say that I want to go into an issue and I'm going to work on making that button green for, let's say, the account creation form, right? And I want to start to work on this. I'm going to go ahead and create a merge request directly from this issue. What this will do is create a merge request. It will start a branch. And as you can see, it automatically copies some of the metadata over in terms of milestones. And if I go back to look at the issue itself, you'll notice it automatically relates the merge request. So the actual work that's going to be delivering this issue to the issue. So it's really a helpful way to kind of automate the flow from, if you think about all the way from design to planning to down to your merge request level. So let's say within this, we want to go ahead and make that change and satisfy that requirement. We can go and open the web IDE, which is our browser-based code editor. And I'm going to go into my actual project. And I'm going to, for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this. And let's say I'm going to add a new file. Call this button.txt, button.test.tsx. And I'm going to copy that test over that I wrote before for something else. And I'm going to intentionally make this fail to show you how it works when your tests don't work. So as you can see right here, I have this requirement 1 that I copied over, and I created a requirement 3 with the ID of 3. And we're going to say that hypothetically, we will make the button green. The button should be green. And so now that I've sort of gotten this in, I'm going to make my tests fail on purpose. And I'm going to commit this change up. Now that I've committed it, I can actually go look at my merge request. And it's in draft. It's not ready yet. So we're going to wait for the pipelines to run for a second. And we actually hop over and check them out. And what this is going to do is it's running my test right now. And if the test pass, it will go ahead and build. So we can actually watch the output of that running. While we're waiting for that to run, how about we hop back over and we can look at the merge request just a little bit. Similar to issues in epics and all the other things within GitLab, merge requests are another place where you can collaborate. Similarly to what we talked about previously, you can have threaded conversations. You can see your pipelines that are running. You can see the relationship to the issue above it. And so this is where a lot of engineers spend the bulk of their time in terms of once they actually start the work. But the kind of nice thing about it is now that this pipeline's running, if I were to go look at this issue, for example, I can actually see that a pipeline is running, which means an engineer's picked it up. They've actually committed some code against this. It's in its draft form, it's open. And so within the issue view, is if I'm a product manager, I have a great way to visually understand that the epic is, or that the issue is in progress, that the merge request has code that has been pushed up against it. And I can jump directly within that to see more about where it's at. So as you can see, our pipeline for this is finished. Is failed because if we want to go look at it, we can see that the test failed. We can go look at our actual test output here, and let's see what failed. So right here, the button should be green. The status is that. So because this test failed, and this test is linked to requirement 3, if I go look at my requirements list now, you'll see that that test, this requirement is actually failed, right? So this is a great way that you can dynamically and automatically link your requirements directly to the test cases in your pipeline and in the code, which is a pretty cool thing to do. So if I were to go back now and open that up, let's say we need to go fix what we did. We can open up the web IDE right again, troubleshoot it. We can go back to the file that's failing, and we can make the changes. And so we'll go back to making sure that the test can pass in this case. And now I'm going to go ahead and commit this change. I'm going to call fix test, screen button test. And we've committed that up. And that does that automatically triggers the pipeline to run again. And what will happen as soon as that gets done running, it will mark the requirement as satisfied. And this is a great way to actually tie requirements and planning objects, long-lived system behaviors that you want to document directly to the code that implements them. So stepping back a minute, let's go up and talk about a couple of other neat features in GitLab. One of them is issue templates. And in ops, I've created a couple different templates within our kind of settings or shared repo. And templates are just markdown files that live in a repo. And here I've created a template for a bug. And I'm going to go ahead and use the quick actions that we have within GitLab to automatically apply a bug label or a triage label whenever this bug template is used. And let's say I want to standardize all of my groups of projects to use the same set of templates, and I want to centrally manage it from just this one project. I can go into my settings within my top level group. I can go down into my templates. And I've already selected that project, but what that does is if I want to go back and let's say I need to create a bug issue and the API project, for example, I can go into this project, I can create a new issue, I can select the template, say bug, and we can say it should work and it doesn't. It work and it doesn't. I can enter the steps to reproduce based on the template that we have defined. And then when I go ahead and create this API bug, add a title, create the issue. As you can see, it automatically applies that labels that we set in our bugs. So this is also a great way to standardize the intake of new issue creation, also standardize metadata that gets applied when issues get created. And it's pretty dynamic what you can do with it. So I think the last thing that we want to focus in on a little bit is talking about reporting and analytics. So there's a couple different kinds of reporting in GitLab. There's some related to maybe an engineering manager is more interested in terms of your repository or your productivity. One of the things that I want to talk about is insights, and insights are kind of interesting in that you can create your own customizable dashboards to report on issue and merge request behavior. So kind of in this ops project that we talked about, I created this insights.yaml file. And let's say I want to have one dashboard page in my company insights for the overview. I'm going to have basically I want to see all of the open by type work items. And I want to see that per week. And so I've created my lower level work items, task, story, maintenance, bug. I want to look at all of them that are the issues that have been opened. I'm going to group it by week. I also want to look at all of the issues that have been closed by type, right? And so it's the same type of thing, but instead I'm looking at the issuable state of closed. So now that I've created in this ops, I can go into Awesome Code. I can go into my settings, and then I can pick that ops project to be the repo or the kind of report template that I want to apply to this group. So if I go look at my insights report now, I see that dashboard, and I can see Awesome Code work item by type. I can see work items closed by week by type, and I haven't closed anything yet. But if I go back into my board and let's say we were working on something and we make progress on it, which is great, I can go ahead and drag it for close. So we got these two endpoints done. I can go back into my insights, and as you'll see, those have been done. So it's a great way to create custom reporting and custom analytics directly within group level. And this can be applied to any other group level that you want. The other sort of report that I use a lot and that I find is very valuable is our value stream report. And this can be customized. We talked about our two sort of parallel workflows or work tracks that we go through. We have the build track and we have the refine track. what you're able to do in the value stream report area is you can actually create custom value stream reports. So here I've set this up. I'm naming it the refine track. I call it the first stage triage. It's going to start counting the time from when the triage label is applied to an issue to when the triage label is removed. We're also going to measure the time from when design label is applied to removed. And so this basically mirrors what looks like our refinement process or our refinement track. And over time, as I work on my different issues, it's going to start counting the time and state for each of those issues that flows through this. And I can measure the overall lead time and cycle time. I've also created a custom report for the build track, which mirrors in the same way. So there's not a lot of data here because this is a demo, but if I hop over to GitLab's actual value stream analytics report, I've created a similar one because we have a workflow as well where we go through planning breakdown, solution validation, design, similar to what I showed you. And I can actually look across all my different stages in my process, and I can find which one is the bottleneck. So our build track starts in ready for development, and we can see right here that right now review, if I look furthest down, usually if it's a pull-based system, you want to look at furthest down the chain to see what the longest process is. And right now for GitLab, that's review. I can click into this review stage. I can see the total time and stage for each of these issues that have gone through the stage. As immediately I notice right here that there's an outlier. There's one issue that was in review for 212 days. So I can immediately hop in. I can have a conversation on this issue. I can start asking questions. I can see who the owners for this were and try to gauge what do we need to do to fix our process so things don't sit there that long, right? It could have been just, issue hygiene. It could have been, something was blocking it. But what's great about this is you get this snapshot high-level overview of all of your work items that have gone through this stage, and you can see which ones are your outliers. You can see what your median time is in stage. And so it's a great way to get this sort of overview of your entire process and also be able to understand where your bottlenecks are. We also measure our lead time and our cycle time, our deployment frequency, total number of deploys. And we also can have a breakdown of task by work type. And this kind of uses labels at GitLab. And so you can actually see how many issues similar to insights have been completed over time. So this is an absolutely wonderful report. And that in and of itself is a high level summary of how you can do multi-team planning within GitLab Ultimate. If you have any questions, please reach out. You can find me on GitLab at gweaver, and feel free to email me as well. My email is on some of our direction pages, which I will drop in the notes for this video. Thanks a lot for spending some time with me. I hope it was helpful. Until next time.